Number one in the power rankings, but that draw this weekend wasn't ideal. But even less ideal are these injuries to Nico Lodeiro and Stefan Fry. What is going on in Sounders world?
Yeah, it was. I think there was a preparation among Sounders fans that Nico and Steph were going to be out for, like a fair amount, like maybe a little. Like I don't think anyone was expecting them back necessarily on July or June 19th, but the news that they were going to be out effectively indefinitely and it was a bit of a heavy load. I gotta say, it was unexpected, and it was a big blow. Like I think there's an emotional hit that they take that the team took. We talked to Kellen Rowe the day of, and he kind of admitted that it was, there was an emotional aspect of that for the players too. And I don't know how much that impacted the way they played on Sunday, but. Yeah, I mean it's because I do think a lot of this start was good. Yeah.
What did impact the way they played on Sunday? And it was the same thing that we saw the week before against Atlanta. You go, well, for the last 80 minutes of that game against Atlanta, they didn't create anything, and they really didn't create that much against this past weekend against Austin either. So what is impacting the way they're playing?
Yeah, I think that's. I think it's a great question. I think to some degree they haven't taken advantage of their transition opportunities as well as they had early in the season. Mm-hmm. They're not getting themselves into, this is not a team that has been building chances through long spells of possession, which is actually something they did really effectively last year at times. And they've traditionally under Brian Schmetzer been able to do that on occasion, is build these, 15, 16, 17 pass scoring sequences. And that is not something that they're really even attempting to do right now. When they're at their best, they're in these transition moments. We saw them get out into a few of those on Sunday, but they aren't as, they just, that final ball is not there. Maybe even there's two great examples of that. Freddie Montero put Brad Smith into space in the first half. He got in behind the defense. He has Rui Diaz streaking towards the goal, and he puts a cross behind him. Then in the second half, another transition opportunity that results with Freddie Montero putting in just an absolutely perfect ball to Rui Diaz right around the penalty spot, and he whiffs on it. And and they need to create more of those chances. You can't just create two of those and expect to score 2 goals. That's just not how it works. But the point is that they had been pretty lethal in those opportunities in the first 6 games of the season, and they just haven't been finishing them in the last 2 games. And so I think that's probably a big part of it, is just the lethality of their finishing, if that's a term. But yeah, it does seem like teams, and they also just weren't able to get into transition as much against Austin, because Austin, for the first time this year, the Sounders actually won the possession battle, and Austin did a good job of not letting them get out and run.
So how does he use this break, Brian Schmetzer?
I think a lot. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that they probably need to I think they're probably going to take a week off at least, of really take a week off and clear their heads and say okay, we got through that. And it sounds funny to be saying that, because this is a team that's 5-0-3, off to their best start. They look about as good as they could possibly look defensively. But I think that there is maybe some mental weight that needs to be lifted from that a lot of players have had to step into roles that they weren't expecting to step into this year. And so I think a lot of it is clearing their head. And then I think it's also kind of rethinking how they are going to rebuild the attack without Rui Diaz, because the reality is that Rui Diaz is probably going to miss somewhere between 4 and 6 games coming out of this break. And right now, that looks like it could cripple this team pretty badly, and they might actually be without Christian Roldan for a few of those too if he goes to the Gold Cup. So I think they got their work cut out for them. I think they're going to have to sort of reimagine the way that the offense works. I think we're going to see a lot more Freddie Montero and Will Bruin, and they need to kind of get used to that.
We're talking to Jeremiah Oshan at Sounders at Heart. I felt good to say that. Felt like I was on 810 The Fan. But one more question for you here, Jeremiah, because I know this is the Sounders. I know it's Garthalager way. That means this summer there's something coming. How big, where, who, What does this team need? What do you think Garth will go after to reinforce them?
I would be surprised if they don't sign like a U22 initiative type player. I don't know that that is necessarily going to be someone that's going to come in and, revamp the team the way that, you expected a Nico Ladero or a Raul Ruidiaz to do in years past. But I do think that they'll sign at least a U22 player. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they sign a TAM player maybe as well. I'm not sure if I don't know quite how much cap space they have if they can do both, but I suppose neither one would take up a huge amount of cap space as long as they have some allocation money. So I think they'll sign at least one or two potentially impact players. It's not going to be a DP. I don't think I saw it suggested that maybe they can find like a Victor Vasquez type of player who is maybe on the end of their towards the end of their professional career. I don't know that that's something that they're going to try to do. We haven't really heard much about that. And what position that player will play, I think it'll probably be someone in the attacking band. But I don't know that. I honestly couldn't tell you whether it's going to be like, I don't know that they're going to go out and sign like a pure winger, even though that's the thing that it looks like they need most. But I don't know that they are convinced that they're going to be going back to a 4-2-3-1 next season. So we'll see.
All right, Seattle Sounders, number 1 in these Week 7 power rankings. Always great to chat, Jeremiah. We appreciate you, man. I just got a text from one Charlie Davies that said, "Hey, you around?" He said, "Sorry, bro, I'm not." So Jeff Lemieux is here. I see him down there. Jeff, if you want to jump in, feel free. Doyle, let's get your take on the Revs at number 2. We've said on Extra Time that they're second best team in the league, second best team in the first best team in the Eastern Conference. Certainly a win this weekend. I wouldn't say they eked it out over Cincinnati, but it doesn't matter. It's 3 points.
It does matter, right? Because they did get the win, and that's great. And they are playing some great soccer. And in Carlos Gil, they have arguably the league MVP at this point, certainly the best midfielder in the league this year. They have, in Matt Polster, the most underrated defensive midfielder in the league at this point. They've shown they have depth along the back line, but they are still in the situation where they're eking out wins against Cincinnati. They're eking out wins at home against Atlanta United's B team. The Revs look really, really good. And the underlying numbers like them a lot. They're creating a lot of chances, but they're still not finishing a ton of them. Now, this has maybe started to change with Adam Buksa being on a bit of a tear. He's getting into good spots, and I think he has 3 goals in his last 3 games, 4 on the season. And that's great. They need that from him in order to actually be the second best team in the league. And they need more productivity from their wingers, because right now, we're almost a quarter of the way into the season. Their wingers have combined for 2 goals. If you're going to play a 4-2-3-1, and it looks like that's what Bruce Arena is doing, you need to get productivity from your wingers. You need these guys to be goal dangerous, and they haven't been at this point. So while I totally understand why the Revs are second and they're sitting pretty at the top of the Eastern Conference, there's still this very big and obvious flaw that it doesn't seem like it's been fixed.
Jeff, you there, man? We're talking about flaws of the team averaging 2.13 points per game. So I'm giving you an opportunity to chime in.
Man, I came on to listen to Charlie. I mean, I did too. I'll tune in and see what Charlie's got to say about the.
Well, Jeff, as you know, Paramount Plus, it's a very strong draw. And once you're there with the boys, you got Gooch and Dempsey, and you're chopping it up at breakfast, all of a sudden, Spaces doesn't seem quite as attractive. What do you think about this team right now?
No, you know what? I can't say I disagree in the sense that, I think when the Revs look at where they are in the standings and the results that they've gotten through the first 8 games of the season, obviously they're happy with being at the top of the Eastern Conference and being near the top of the MLS standings. But I tend to agree in the fact that I think the Reds probably agree that they haven't put together a complete 90-minute performance yet to this point in the season, which I think, from the club perspective, they look at, there's almost a positive that they haven't put it together yet for an entire game, yet they're still getting results. So I think you can look at that in a positive sense from a club perspective and say, once it comes together, which the hope is that through the summer months, it fully comes together, then you're not eking out results anymore. By that point, if you're starting to finish off some of these chances they're creating, that's when you're starting to see some 2-0, 3-0 wins. But the fact that they haven't quite clicked on all cylinders yet, but they're still getting the results, to me, that's the mark of, a good team. But once you get into these summer months, they're really looking to kind of put together some of those 90-minute performances.
Jeff, is your sense that this shift to the 4-2-3-1 is a permanent one at this point? Not to say that we'll never see the 4-4-2 again, but it's been, I think, 6 of the last 7 games that it's been the 4-2-3-1. The only time they played a 4-4-2 in that stretch was the loss to Nashville. So it does seem like Bruce Arena has made this decision in large part to get Carlos Gil more of the game.
And that really has been that's exactly what Bruce said was, they'll continue to shift the formation around if need be, through this busy stretch in the summer based on which personnel they're using. Maybe it looks a little bit different from game to game, but it does feel like it's probably primarily going to be that 4-2-3-1. And that's exactly what Bruce said was regardless of what formation they use, regardless of how they actually set up the 11, the objective is going to be to get Carlos Gil central. We saw early in the season when they were using that 4-4-2, Carlos was lining up out on the right side. And I understand that in that setup, he has some freedom. He had a lot of freedom to shift inside when on the ball, but he wasn't finding the ball nearly enough. And now that they've got him set up in a little bit more of a central role, he's had I think 3 or 4 games in which he's had the most touches. When he's on the ball, that's when the Revs are at their best. So I think for the most part, it is going to be the 4-2-3-1, but regardless of how they set up, the primary objective is going to make sure that Carlos is staying as central as possible.
So the second part of that then is what happens with the 2 DP forwards, because neither Gustavo Bo nor Adam Buxa obviously are wingers. So suddenly there's like a little bit of a logjam, and the formation doesn't necessarily fit the highest paid, highest expectation personnel on the team.
Yeah, it's sort of the question of the summer right now. I mean, it's almost worked out through the first 8 games of the season that Gustavo Bo dealt with a couple of injuries. So while he was out with injury, Adam Buxa played up top. When they felt like they needed to give Adam Buxa a little bit of a rest, Gustavo Bo went up top. That's clearly the best position for both of those players, is kind of playing in that number 9 position as close to goal as possible. They play the position differently. Buxa can play a little bit more back to goal. Gustavo is a little bit more trying to get in behind. I think Gustavo Bo, when we saw Gustavo Bo come into the Revs last season, 2 seasons ago in 2019, he actually did play out on the wing. But then the question becomes, is that his best spot? Probably not. So whether they end up putting Gustavo Bo in one of those wing positions, or whether they just continue to rotate these 2 guys in and out of that number 9 spot and use one of them as a starter and one of them off the bench, it's a big question for this summer. But it's working right now in the sense that when both guys have played, they've been scoring goals. But yeah, once they're both healthy through the summer months, that's a big question for the team for sure.
Right now, second in these power rankings are the Revs. Third in points per game, though. Above them, the Sounders, who were number 1 in the LA Galaxy, just 0.01 points per game above right now. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Jeff Lemieux, he is a senior writer and editor for the Revs. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us, man, and shout out to Andrew Farrell, who has been here. All Andrews are the best. Andrew, I appreciate you as well. Number 3, the Philadelphia Union, keeping in the Eastern Conference here. We'll have another one right after that. They are third in this one. Doyle, they're on a little bit of a tear right now. Mm-hmm. Seems like once they didn't have to focus on CCL, didn't have to travel, didn't have to do double duty, they're good to go. In Portland Timbers, as I rock the jersey, thank you, Timbers. This is incredible, and it's got the name on the back that I would have put on it if I had the choice. Jeremy Abobasi. What do you think about this Union performance against the Timbers?
Like you said, they're on a tear, right? I think they've taken 13 of their past 15 points after advancing to the CCL semifinals. 13 of the last 15 points on offer. This performance was commanding. They were at home against a team that had traveled across the continent and were missing 10 players. And when you're a good team and you get a wounded team coming to visit, you have to put them to the sword. And that's what the Union did, and they deserve a ton of credit for that. And at the same time, it doesn't really feel like they're clicking yet. They're not as dangerous in transition as what we saw last year. And part of that might be personnel, right? Because if you lose Brendan Aronson, you're just not going to be as dangerous in transition right away. But they just have so many ways to beat you, whether it's Kasper Shabilko being wonderful again in the final third, and then Santos and Burke kind of rotating in that other starting forward spot. And then in this game, set pieces. They were just absolutely dominant on set pieces in this one. So they've checked a lot of boxes. They are much better at this point than I think any of us thought they were going to be. They haven't missed a beat without overall. I guess they haven't missed a beat without Aronson and Mark McKenzie and Ray Gaddis. And like they just culturally, from Jim Curtin, Ernst Tanner down to the players, they just deserve so much credit for that.
This is not the Union team of like what you would probably say at this point 2017 and prior.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about it as we talked through this. We're like, okay, we're to the semifinals of the CCL, and that makes sense. And they're on a tear, and they're at the top of the Eastern Conference and going to challenge, and certainly you think get a home game in the playoffs. I mean, that says so much about the depth of work that they did, and also the patience that they had to sort of let it play out. And you can certainly see that on the academy side, but you can also see it in the developmental side. It's not just for them like, hey, great, Paxton Aronson made his debut at the first team in MLS this last weekend, I believe. That's awesome. That's wonderful. He's got, his brother that did it before him, and maybe he will be as good a player or even better. You never know. But I continue to go back to a guy like Olivier Mbaizo and the recruitment that required, and the years that it required of development, and the patience that both the club and Mbaizo had to have. And also, I have to believe the guidance that Mbaizo was offered by a guy like Ray Gaddis. Like that's why you have guys like Ray in your club. Not only are they going to give you however many games he did over the course of that decade, incredibly so, but he was slowly setting a culture and setting expectations and guiding the next guy, and now he's there. And you look across this team, and that's the case. I think it's been incredibly impressive as well from Ernst Tanner, and I think we doubted him a little bit in some ways because it seemed like he was bargain bin shopping.
Yes.
But it just turned out that he knew what was in. It was like, you see all this stuff on Gary V and stuff like, what are you going to go find and flip? Like Ernst Tanner is like the Gary V of MLS. He's like going to the garage sale and he's like, this guy doesn't know what he has. He doesn't know. We are going to snatch up Leon Flock for $200,000. Can he play left back? Sure. Can he be one of the better defensive midfielders in this league? Look at that. He can. And then you put him in the safe hands of Jim Curtin, which again, go back pre-2017 or whatever that date cutoff might be when people were saying, why is he even the head coach of the Union? We've got to go a different direction. And that speaks to the development as well. So I just think if you're looking around Major League Soccer as an expansion team, as an existing team that's having struggles, you would do a lot worse than to look at what the Philadelphia Union have done and think, what of this can we take? You may not be able to take all of it because the amount of money that they put into the youth development side and the resources as far as facilities go, and then just the years is hard to replicate. And if you do it, it's going to take you a decade minimum. But it is such an incredible success story. And I'm happiest most for the Sons of Ben, who went through a lot of years of relative disappointment after they were the ones that really beat the drum and drove the wagon and got this team to a place where they would be in this league. And now look at them. So Philadelphia Union, number 3, wonderful win for them against the Portland Timbers. Of course, you all know we're in a big break right now from MLS, so this will be our last show for a while, but we're wrapping it up. We're about, 20% through the season? And let's talk NYCFC. I'm looking for Roberto Abramowitz. Roberto, I invited you, man. If you're there, holler at me. I don't think I see him right now, Doyle, so I'm going to drop into his DMs. Mm-hmm. What do you think about NYCFC right now?
I think they're better than the record indicates. Just looking at the way they play, and like, it's not that their record is bad at all, and obviously they're coming off a big 2-1 come-from-behind win at LAFC, but like they deserve to be fourth in the power rankings right now, and that's fourth with a bullet because they have done a lot of this while juggling injuries. Like Maxi Morales has been in and out of the lineup. Alfredo Morales has been in and out of the lineup. They've had issues with Collins, Chanel missing a little bit of time. Anton Tinnerholm, who was probably the best fullback in the league last year. In fact, I voted for him Defender of the Year. He has been in and out of the lineup. On top of doing all this without these guys coming in, NYCFC have done the thing we've been asking them to do for years. They have gone out and they have started spending money on wunderkinds, CFG style targets from around the world. It's Thales Magno, Sebastian Rodriguez looks like he's coming. There's Andrade as well. Like, these are significant investments. So this team has a clear identity on the field, whether they're playing out of that 3-4-1-2 or 3-1-4-2 or the 4-3-3, and they're imposing it in spite of the fact that injuries have forced them to rotate their squad so much. So, like, if you want to, people are kind of sleeping on NYCFC, and I got to put my hand up because I thought this was going to be the year that they took a big step backwards. It is clearly not going to be that. This team is playing some of the best soccer in the league, and like I said, they deserve this spot in the top 5.
I'm really curious to see the trajectory and the impact that Thales Magno and also Thiago Andrade has for this team, because I think of those players and I think back to Jesus Medina, who was sort of he was the iteration of this before them, right? He was the young South American winger that you wouldn't spend multi-million dollars on and was going to be an impact player and has sort of been start-stop. We've seen more start this year, and that's part of it for them. We've seen more productivity. We've seen more life from him, but I am curious to see how under a new coach and Ronnie Dyla, who wasn't there when they signed Jesus Medina, but has helped him move along a little bit, how these guys are developed and how they're eased into the squad. And I think it's good for them to have a guy like Hebert. I saw an interview the other day where Hebert was joking around saying, yeah, I told them go 1v1 and just cross it to me. But you have to have within clubs and situations, and this goes for soccer as it does in any profession, I believe, people that can help other people settle and make them feel comfortable. Yeah. People that can...
well, it's the culture thing, right? It's like what we were talking about with the Union. The Union have clearly done something right over the last few years to make it so that a Leon Flock or a Jose Martinez, who was not, Jose Martinez was not a big signing. Kai Wagner, like, these guys are not huge signings, but they're coming in and they're settling right away, and they are clearly buying into the culture. And the question I have for NYCFC at this point is, can they take that journey that Jesus Medina obviously went on and compress it for the likes of Thales Magno and Rodriguez and Thiago Andrade and the rest of these kids that they are now bringing in to try to raise this team's ceiling? Because over the last 5 years, nobody in the league has collected more points than NYCFC. They have been the best regular season team in the league over the last 5 years. They have no supporter shields to show for it. And obviously they have a history of failure in the playoffs. So the question is, can these guys raise the ceiling enough so that this NYCFC team is the first to bring home some sort of silverware for this club? Right now, I mean, they're playing well enough. And it wouldn't shock me at all if we're talking about them at, 5 months from now as perhaps the inevitable supporter shield champions, because they are playing that well.
Can I ask you one last question before we move on here to Sporting Kansas City? We have Carter Augustine on deck here to talk Kansas City. James Sands in the U.S. national team. Do you think he has a case to be there?
Oh yeah, I'm pissed that he's not. Like, I understand that he has limitations receiving the ball in traffic and with his distribution. But if you look at his passing this year, he has taken a massive step forward in his progressive passing. Now, he's not, Tyler Adams or Jackson Ewell level or Kellen Acosta level. And like, clearly Greg Berhalter has a type. But I think the first job of the the first job of the defensive midfielder is still to defend. And I think his reading of the game and his understanding of the game and understanding of the defensive responsibilities is a step above everybody in the potential number 6 pool, other than obviously Tyler Adams. So I wish James Sands was there, and I hope we see him this summer at the Gold Cup.
Before we move on, Roberto Abramowitz is here with us for one little tidbit on NYCFC. Roberto, thank you for joining us. If you want to take yourself off mute here, give me a minute on where this team stands right now in your mind. You there?
Says just fell off, so no big deal. But I'm okay. It's all good. It's all good. I'm finding out that immediately after a shower to try to wear AirPods is not the easiest thing in the world. It's because they keep on slipping out.
Give me your take real quick, Roberto, because we got to keep this show moving to get to all our guests, man. What is your take on NYCFC right now and what Ronnie Dyla is building?
I think they're in really, really good shape. They desperately needed reinforcements, especially on the attacking end, and now they finally have it. While we were doing the game, we were wondering, when was he going to make changes? Because we've always wondered, sometimes he makes changes really, really late. And then all of a sudden you see 4 guys come in and you see how that changes the game. And from there on, it was all New York City FC. So now that this team is basically complete, they're going to pick up a DP probably in the summer. So then after that, we'll see who that is and what position it is. I expect it to be either a 9 or a 10 for them to come in with that. And then we're going to see. But, I mean, the way I look at this team, I mean, it has to be top 2, top 3 as far as favorites to win the cup. And I think that's where they belong.
I think I agree with you, and history says the same, honestly. I mean, sometimes this side of New York gets a little bit of slag, but if you go back and look at points in regular season, they're right there. It's the postseason that's the difference. I do have another question. I always do. You said a 9 or a 10. Could this be the right time to get the 10 to take over from Maxi whenever that, whenever his age starts to, count him out?
Well, remember that the schedule is not going to be kind to everybody once we get back from the break. There's going to be a lot of weeks where it's going to be 3 games in 8 days. So, and Maxi, for the past year and a half, since he had his 20th this season, hasn't been able to stay healthy. I mean, and that's the fact. I mean, he's missed a ton of games. And this is probably his last year. He's made mention in the past that he wants to go back to Argentina. So we expect this to be his last year in MLS. So, yes, they have to find somebody who is going to be able to take over that role either immediately or when he retires or when he goes back to Argentina to play, I should say. So I would think that of all the positions, I think that's probably where they're going to look a little bit harder. It really depends who's available.
All right, Roberto, sorry to pull you in here late, man. Wish we'd had more time with you. We'll hit you back here in the coming weeks. We do this every week, 2 hours, so there's always opportunity. Appreciate your time, man. Let's keep it rolling here on this Power Ranking show on Twitter Spaces. Of course, the top 10 you can also rewatch back on YouTube. At number 5, Sporting Kansas City. They are dead even where they were last week. Jump in here, Carter Augustine. It's great to talk to you, man. What do you think of this team? And there's big news with you as well.
Hey, fellas. Yeah, thanks for having me. I think this team, just as Roberto was saying there, I think they have a real shot to win the whole thing. So, the lesser news from my front was that was my last game on the sidelines this past weekend, and I was telling some friends that it's a bit of a shame that I'm leaving when this team is playing some beautiful soccer, and I think they truly do have a really good chance to win the whole thing. They're that good.
All right, ding, ding, ding! It's the Gianluca Busio hour. What did you see? Let's just dig in. And Doyle, I know that you've written a lot about Gianluca, and Sporting KC fans don't always agree. We'll start with you, Carter, and what you've seen from his development, not just this year, but maybe in particular, but over the course of the last couple of years.
Sure. I think for one, having a chance to, have been watching this kid since the GA Cup days when he went down there with Sporting KC Academy. He's always had such good technique for his age and then, exceeding his age group. And that's something I think he relies on. When he strikes a ball, his technique has just always been so good and a step above. And I think you're starting to see with the games under his belt, now he's getting the confidence into his game at the MLS level. And with that you're starting to see the talent shine through. And I think you have to credit him since he's played, up top. He's played as a number 10. He's played as the number 6. In the past, he's played on the wings. He's basically played wherever the manager has needed him for any particular game. And I think that speaks a lot to his ability to read the game, and he can translate that to different positions in midfields or, as we saw, playing a false 9 or on the wing. And we hear all the time about the free kick prowess, and we've seen him come close. And then this weekend, I mean, I'm in my 10th season watching, being at Sporting KC home games, and that's got to be one of the very best goals ever scored at Children's Mercy Park. It's, one of the best free kicks you'll see. And March was not going to move to get near that one. So I think you're starting to see this guy come into his own, and he's a top individual. He always has his head on his shoulders. He's very mature for his age. And I think he's starting to just get a little bit more and more comfortable week in and week out. And at times he's becoming a game changer for this team now.
Sporting KC fans, Doyle, get annoyed with you. And I got to let them on my mentions because you nitpick a little bit. But I think that's what we do with young players because we're trying to figure out what their games are, how they translate to that next level. I'm not asking you to nitpick here. I'm just asking you to give your honest take on Busio as it stands right now.
So it's the same thing that I said about Sands, except in reverse. My criticism of Sands is that he has been afraid to pass the ball forwards, and that is what has kept him out of Greg Berhalter's plans and sort of changed the way he is looked at, not for the best, at various youth national team levels. With Busio, it's if he's going to be a 6, he has to do a better job of winning his duels. He has to do a better job of being physical in those big moments. And right now he's at or near the bottom of the table, or in the bottom quadrant anyway, of defensive midfielders in this league when it comes to those 1v1 battles. And this is the same thing like Jackson Ewell, who now wins close to 70% of his individual duels. This is the same thing he had to go through when he came into the league at 2021. So Busio is going through it a little bit earlier. But this isn't picking a nit. This is pointing out what he's doing that is costing his team goals. And we saw it on the final goal of the night when he lost you have to win this ball 50-50 off a clearance in second half stoppage time. Now, obviously, it didn't cost Sporting Kansas City any points, but if you want to get to the next level, and clearly Gianluca Busio does, those are the plays you have to make to be a 6 or an 8. Roger Espinoza makes that play. Ilie Sanchez makes that play. Gianluca Busio has to make that play. And I'm sure he heard about it internally, and given his improvement curve, hopefully he'll get better at making those plays.
What's the positionality for him going forward? Carter, you mentioned how many different places he's at least been above average or average. Where do you think he goes? What do you think Peter Vermees sees him as? What might he be at a in a different club?
It's a great question. I think, despite Matt's point about the duels at the moment, he is getting a lot involved in quite a lot of them. He's covering a lot of ground, and especially how they're set up with, at the moment, Fontas and Ilie as center backs. They need those youthful legs and the exuberance in midfield. And I'm really curious once Nicolas Isimat-Mirin gets healthy, what Peter Vermees is going to do, because right now they have those legs in the 6th position, and he covers just a bit more ground than Ilie does at the moment when he's playing there. So I'm curious, not only long term but short term, where Busio will end up. I think you're watching him play right now, and he's doing a bit of everything, and he just seems natural at that number 6 position. I know he's always wanted to play a little further up the pitch, so I'm curious where he develops. But as of now, I'm kind of seeing him coming into his own in this position.
Can I ask you before we let you go, Carter, about Johnny Russell? He's the captain of the team. He just hasn't been healthy, it doesn't seem, this year. He hasn't been Johnny Russell. And yet, Sporting Kansas City is still second in the Western Conference, on a nice run, winning games at home, 2 points per game. Everything's pretty good. Where does he stand right now?
Well, you saw him come on as a sub, and I mean, the noise when he's entering the pitch at Children's Mercy Park is incredible, because he's just a guy that he just gets fans up off their seats every time he touches it. And yeah, he's coming back to full health. He got a knock when they're in the last stages of their training camp. So, despite that, they lead the league in scoring. That's not too bad. They have 4 comeback victories already. The franchise record is 5. You've got Alan Pulido, who's, just a monster. And then Shallowy's playing well. Gadi Kinda just got called up because he's a bit of a wild card, and he can change games as well. But I think that's why I've been saying this team can win the whole thing, because once you get a fully fit Johnny Russell, you saw a play late on in that second half against Houston where he just sprinted full speed towards the sideline on a clearance, got there ahead of I think it was Boniek, and then he looked really disappointed that he didn't get an assist, because it would have been an all-time assist at that pitch as well. And he looked pretty healthy to me on that sprint down the sideline and the touch ahead of Boniek. So I think once they get him back into the fold, it's a team that can score with just about anyone. So they'll maybe be working on some things, trying to figure out who's going to fit in along the back line, but a fully fit Johnny Russell wearing the captain's armband makes this team very dangerous.
Still a little incomplete right now, Sporting Kansas City personnel-wise. We'll see as they improve, but they're in a good spot now. Carter Augustine, last game on the sidelines. But before you leave KC, I need to get a beer with you, man. So hit me up. That's Sporting KC at 5. At number 6, LA Galaxy. Josh Gassman is here with us on vacation, doing long road trips with small children. You brave soul.
Yeah, I'm here, Andrew. I actually just came on to roast you about your guacamole ruins the burrito
Californians.
take.
Californians.
I assume somebody else had already done it, but hey, maybe I'm the first one to do it. But that was a horrible take.
It's been done.
Okay,
it's been done.
Good.
Look, I joke about my Galaxy shrine. I don't actually have one, but it's like a figment of my imagination over here in my office. But if I had one, by God, it's working. This has been, I have to imagine, a breath of fresh air for Galaxy fans after a couple years of just sort of grasping for straws, really.
Yeah, I mean, we said it in the press box during one of the preseason games. We said, oh my God, a team with an idea, a plan going forward, tactics, a coach who isn't afraid to make subs, all of those things sort of put together rather quickly. You can see, that the Galaxy are playing with an idea of what they want to do. It's not perfect, and it's going to be far from perfect, I imagine, for, the next year or 2 years as Greg Vanney sort of puts his pieces in position and people start to understand his system. But even, the basics of what he's trying to do. I mean, he talked to Julian Araujo after 2 poor games that he had really to sort of start the season. And he said, you're a defender, so defend first. And he says that's all he told him. And you look at Julian Araujo, who I think has been one of the best defenders in the league so far this year, and is sort of making me look good by saying, maybe he's not here past this summer. Maybe he goes in the winter. But Julian Araujo has a lot of eyes on him right now. So, I mean, little things like that, the confidence that Greg Vanney has shown in some of the youth players and giving them minutes, the confidence in the bench, everything feels like it's at least headed in the right direction.
And that's the big change, right? Because the Galaxy at no point in the past dozen years or longer really have they had the patience to let young players play through some rough patches. And it looks like it's not just Julian Araujo getting that. We've seen Efra Alvarez suddenly get more minutes. And obviously Saldana and Cameron Dunbar. And you go down the list of the homegrown players, and then the imports as well are getting more chances. It feels like just a cultural sea change, and it happened overnight, right?
Yeah, it did. I mean, everybody comes in and talks about changing the culture, and it was the buzzword in the off season, and most of us got sick of hearing it. But you listen to what Greg Vanney does, and just they released some video of like his first talk with the team, and you sat there and said, okay, I can play for this guy. It was pretty simple and just his messaging, but you hear it, and a lot of it is cliche. It's like, we're family, we're going to play like brothers, we're going to fight like brothers. We're all in this together, and it's cliche, and it doesn't work for 90% of the teams out there. It's going, but it's working for the Galaxy right now. I mean, whether they're brainwashed or whatever, it's working. I don't think anybody really cares. They are a big believer in Greg Vanney, and he has so far showed them that he's a big believer in them. So it's it's this relationship, and it's, like I said, far from perfect, but they will outwork any team in this league. And I don't know that you could say that over the last couple of years for sure.
Can I ask you about the transfers, Josh? Maybe you have more insight than I do. I mean, it seems like Jovan Kirovski just loves France. Like, the man wants to be in France. That's the only place that he wants to be. Ligue 2 has really been a huge source here of talent. What's behind that? Why was that sort of the zone that this team is centered around?
Yeah, I talked to GM Dennis DeCloso on our podcast last week, and I said, it seems like you guys are mining France. You're in there, you're trying to take away all the jewels. And really, when you talk to Greg, when you talk to Dennis, and certainly I know I've seen some stuff that Jovan has talked about, it's about finding value. And right now, because of the financial position that some of those clubs are in France, they feel like there is value to be gained from choosing some of these players. I also have to think, and although they've told me this isn't true, I also have to think that whenever you're bringing guys who don't necessarily speak English that well and are coming across, to quite a different situation from France and into Southern California, is having a group of people together who all speak the same language, who all have sort of maybe similar backgrounds, at least from where they came, also helps to sort of settle people. And so I think they found value. And then I think once they found value, they said, okay, well, we can bring together a group of these guys. And, that may help this whole locker room come together. Because as of right now, I know Sacha Kljestan has joked about it a bunch of times, but Sasha's like one of the only guys who speaks French on the team. And now you have Kevin Cabral to go along with Sam Grandsir. You had Sega Coulibaly, who was at the game up in the stands over the weekend. And then you're waiting for Ryan Rabelason. And that's probably not how you say his last name, but until he tells us how to say it, that's how we're saying it.
Before I let you go, Josh, and I appreciate you doing this on your vacation, man, get back to your family in a second. We've heard a lot about the personalities, let's say, of DPs within the Galaxy, and we saw the Zlatan thing at the Athletic recently, and that was incredible. I don't think there is a Kevin on this team, so that works out in this analogy. Compare Chicharito, his personality, his place in the locker room, the way he interacts with the other guys, the way they talk about him, to the Zlatan days.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. Everything in the Athletic seems to be true. I think there's probably too much of a positive spin put on that whenever you think about it, because there was a lot of damage done inside of that locker room. Whenever he was there, he was demanding, but he was a bully. And people can say, hey, that's how stars react and they demand the best. But, whenever you're trying to bring together a group of guys, sometimes bullying them into a position isn't the best way to get the best out of them. And that certainly wasn't the case for the Galaxy. So now you look at Chicharito, who's a motivator. I mean, certainly after last season, not having the year that he wanted to have and that nobody expected him to have, and then going into the offseason and working as hard as he can. I mean, one, he's leading by example right now. He's hardworking. He's in there. He's working out. He's with the team all the time. He's pushing them on. He's advancing them. And you can see, I mean, the guys talk about him, with a lot of respect and saying, he's in there helping us and we're all part of this as a team. So where it was Zlatan and everybody else, it's Chicharito, and Jonathan Dos Santos and Sacha Kljestan and Victor Vasquez. I mean, this is a tight-knit team right now. I'm sure the winning helps. Winning always solves a lot of that stuff. But at the same time, it's a huge, huge difference. And I think that in the way the Galaxy are set up right now, playing as a family for each other is better for them than having Zlatan sort of yelling and screaming at everybody all the time.
Speaking of families, Josh, go be with your family. Galaxy have 3 spots to 6 in these power rankings. Go listen to Corner of the Galaxy. Really good stuff from them covering this team. Appreciate you, Josh. Let's keep it moving, and let's go to Orlando City at 7. Doyle, some news this week as they dropped 3 spots. Some news after that loss to the Red Bulls. They put out a very short communication about Daryl Dike, which was basically that what we all knew to be the case was that Barnsley did not get promoted, and therefore Barnsley is not going to trigger that clause to purchase Daryl Dike. So that opens up the market, I guess, though we already knew that he wasn't going to stay there, to a lot of different clubs. And they're saying, Southampton, Everton, the rumor mill is in full effect. It's basically like the bottom half of the entire Premier League table is being linked with Daryl Dike right now, and then also to the Bundesliga as well. What do you think about this situation? Where might the best place for him be? And how is Orlando City thinking about it? And Alexi Lawless is here. Alexi, I just threw you an invite. If you want to come in, you don't feel any pressure to talk Daryl Dike.
I think that MLS is at a point where, with players like this who are in demand, teams have realized that it's in their best interest to negotiate. You can't hold, if these guys want to go and the offers are out there from teams that really, really want them in, and teams that are in the top 5 leagues in the world. You kind of have to sit down at the table, and it's not to say that Orlando City 100% have to sell. But we know what the business is, and Orlando City know what the business is because they've been through something similar in terms of the Kyle Larin situation 4 years ago. So I don't, just because Barnsley weren't able to execute the agreed upon transfer fee, I don't think that means that Daryl Dike is coming back. Orlando City could certainly use him though. And they've done a really good job of being one of the best defensive teams in the league over this first part of the season, but they're just not generating much going forward. They like Nani when he's available. He has given them a couple golazos. They've able to generate a little bit of stuff off the press, but everything else in terms of their attack has kind of backslid this year. So of course, whether it's Daryl Dike or a different number 9 that they use with whatever profits they can generate from selling Daryl Dike, they have some work to do. But at the same time, I think Oscar Pareja is probably pretty happy with this first segment of the season because they've been so solid and tough to break down. And then coming out of this break, Orlando City is one of the teams that I expect to start playing much better soccer with or without Daryl Dike.
Only one team is allowed fewer goals, and that is the Seattle Sounders with 3 allowed. Alexi, you've run a club before in Major League Soccer. Help us understand what Orlando might be going through right now and what they might be weighing as they make a decision around what has been their fast-rising star in Daryl Dike.
Money. I mean, first and foremost, get as much money as you possibly can. You have, according to what you were saying, a whole lot more options out there that theoretically you're going to play one off the other. But, as I'm sure you guys were talking about, it's one thing to get the money, and then it's another thing to be able to turn that money back around into something productive or something equally productive out there, either from an individual player that replicates what Daryl Dike does, or multiple players out there. So it's yes, there's a business component, and you want to make sure that it's done right for the individual and the precedent that it sets and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is that Oscar's job or anybody's job is ultimately to win, and there are season ticket holders for Orlando where I'm sure they'll be proud of the fact if and when Daryl Dike is sold for a lot of money and goes quote unquote to a higher level. But they want their team to win, and they want to see what that money is going to be used to make that team better right now. So this is all good problems, as Tata would say. These are champagne problems, but you still got to deal with them.
You made this jump. Look, we won't age ourselves here and tell the folks at home how long ago it was that you were playing in Serie A, but you understand what it's like to walk into a locker room in a different league in a different country. Daryl Dike did that, I'm not going to say effortlessly, but he made it look so with Barnsley, but it seems like a culture that he adapted to and embraced very quickly. If you're the individual, the player in this situation, and of course Daryl has his own thoughts about what he would like to do, I'm sure, what would you be thinking? What would you be looking for?
Well, first off, I mean, look, the money is important, and I think he's going to make, if this happens, a whole lot more money. So that's all fine and well, but going to the right place is important. And I think, while he adjusted really well both on and off the field, and yes, the language is the same, and he's a smart person and a smart soccer player, I also think that there's a whole lot more to him than what we saw. And I think a lot of people, that's why they're sniffing around here, is that they see something here that can translate to an even higher level, and quote unquote better teams I think are going to look at him because I don't think we saw everything that Daryl Dike is about in the situation that he had. But you got to come into a new situation, even though he has played now in England. If he continues on in England for a team, you come into a new locker room, there's egos, there's coaches, there's precedent, there is history, there's all the different things, and you got to ingratiate yourself. And that in and of itself is an art and a skill. And everything matters. The way that you walk into the room for the first time, how you greet your fellow teammates, how you interact with them. If you're going in my case, it was going into a different country and culture and different language. And so I was conjugating verbs the very first night that I was there. Part of it was out of necessity to understand what was going on, but part of it was I wanted them to see that. And, that proves a little bit of respect for them and for their culture. And you get the benefit of the doubt. And look, you're going to need the benefit of the doubt, whether it's from the press or whether it's from people in your own club, whether it's from the fans, all that kind of stuff. And everything that you do matters, I guess.
Alexi, let me ask you this, because the way we talk about it now, and I've always been a big proponent of this, MLS as a selling league. This is the global game, right? There are leagues that the best players in the world want to go to, and they tend to be Serie A and La Liga and the English Premier League. Do you want to see Daryl Dike go, or do you want to see Daryl Dike stay in MLS and make the same decision that Eddie Pope did 24 years ago, or that Landon Donovan did repeatedly throughout his career?
I don't want to see him stay unless it's his decision and he sees the opportunity. And by the way, you got to kind of lay out the opportunity for him, both in terms of the money and what you're going to do with him. But I don't want a disgruntled employee on my hands. That's not something that we want, and that's not necessarily a good message. But to your point, at some point, MLS, yes, you have to participate in the global market. But if you are going to be a quote unquote league of choice, as Don Garber likes to call it, at some point you're going to have to start, planting flags and making the point of keeping talent here. Now, it has to be the right type of talent, like we said, that believes that they can do something. Now, why are players? You mentioned Serie A, or you mentioned England. People aren't going to England for the food and the weather, Matt. I mean, it's the reality is that they get paid a boatload of money, okay, and their reputation and their credibility doesn't suffer, okay, and they can win for some of these teams because of the amount of talent that they have possessed. So if MLS can get to a point where you can pay equal or even more at different times, but also their credibility, especially when it comes to the international game, because you don't want to go someplace and be out of sight, out of mind, or be looked at as inferior where you are playing. That hurts your chances of ultimately playing for your national team. So all of that kind of stuff is important. At some point, MLS, I think, is going to have to start to pick and choose and say, these are the players that we want to make a point of going out and retaining to kind of become that league of choice, because you can't become that league of choice if all you're doing is selling. I do agree that they have to be involved in the selling, but right now the selling is paired with this concept that they are going to a better and higher level, and some of that might be a reality, but the selling has to just be your part of the global market as opposed to selling them on to something bigger and better. That's the biggest trick for MLS.
That's a difficult needle to thread, and that's still ongoing here. We all know that. Last one before I let you go here, Alexi, and thanks for jumping on with us. Daryl Dike's place in the U.S. national team, number 9 pecking order. What do you think it should be? Not what Greg Berhalter thinks, because I think he's made that pretty clear. What do you think it should be?
I mean, look, if you're a striker and you score goals and you're doing it at any type of consistency and level, you're part of the conversation. When we saw Sargent the last game. It's not as if he jumped up with both hands and grabbed it. So Daryl Dike, I think, has to be up there in the higher echelon of people that should be considered, and I think will be considered. Nobody's grabbed it right now. I mean, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But if you're Daryl Dike, it means that you still have that chance to step up and make it yours. Somebody's going to do it. I mean, God, there's a huge opportunity for someone to do it right now. And you're doing it, and you're going to be surrounded by arguably the greatest collection of talent that we have had in history. So there's a real opportunity. I just wish somebody would grab a hold of it with 2 hands, and nobody has done that yet. So yeah, Daryl Dike absolutely is going to happen. How long is this show you guys are doing? Jesus.
I mean, we do it's like 2 hours, man. We love this. We don't get opportunities.
You're
ridiculous.
Well, I love it. I love it too, and thank you for having me on. I'm going to continue to listen.
All right, Alexi, we appreciate you, man. On to number 8. That is the Colorado Rapids. We said the Union are on a tear. The Rapids are on a tear, and Abby Mood, she manages Burgundy Wave at SB Nation. You go check that out. It is the best place to get Rapids news, notes, analysis. Abby, thanks for joining us.
Hey, happy Wednesday. Can you believe it? We're talking about the Rapids in the top 10.
Oh, and they could be even higher if the start wasn't a little bit slow. I mean, I can believe it because I've been trying to stand this team for a while. I'm not sure that you can believe it, Abby. Give us the sort of vibes there in Colorado right now.
Yeah, I mean, people are pretty psyched about how things are going. I think going to LAFC, getting that loss was a little blip in the last few games, obviously, but winning 4 out of the last 5, it seems like they've really turned things around after a slow/suspect start and getting their butts kicked by Austin the second game.
What has changed? Has it been just playing through some early rust, or is there something different about the Rapids now? Is it just as like getting Sam Vines back has solidified the back line, or is it kind of like all of the above?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, because I was going to mention, getting Sam Vines back in. I think he came back in that 3rd or 4th games, and that really made a difference. But I think also considering the steady, I would call it steady and consistent improvement that we've seen since Robin Fraser took over, I think they're just able to get some momentum. The season's normal-ish, knock on wood, hopefully. So I think they're just starting to get on a roll and things are starting to come together. But I think the real test will be some of the teams that are coming up after the break.
So what we've seen over the past 6 games, I think, this has happened with Yunus Namli out. And he started the season in central midfield. In my opinion, that was not working just because he's such a negative defensively that made Colorado so easy to play through. He's due back, I believe, by the 19th when the season sort of kicks off again. What is his position? Is he going to be back in central midfield? Is he going to be back on the right wing like we saw him last year? Or is he just going to have to fight for a spot in the 11 at any spot?
That's a good question. I think it is interesting because, as you mentioned, Robin's kind of moved him around and put him in a couple different positions. And last season he was doing really well out on the wing, and then this season they seem to be depending on him, to kind of sit back and, as you were saying, in the central midfield sort of spot. But I don't know, really, to be honest. I mean, I asked Robin about that a couple weeks ago, what he sees his role as. And I think they're still figuring it out. And honestly, in my opinion, I think it's not his spot necessarily in any position. I think everyone's really coming into form and some of the young guys are really fighting to get their spot. So I think anything's up for grabs right now. And I don't think there is a spot for him that is really solidified right now.
We talked just now with Alexi about sort of the two sides of the coin of selling and being a league of choice and, of course, bringing in talent. The Rapids have not been a team that have gone out in the open market and said, we're going to spend huge. And Porig has said, hey, look, that's not who we are, but that's not how we're going to be competitive. And they're showing us that they can do it without that. But what happens this summer? Because for them, it's not just incoming, it's outgoing. Like, they have to set at some point a precedent that they sell young players, maybe a Cole Bassett, maybe a Sam Vines. Do you think they'll be active this summer, whether ingoing or outgoing?
I don't really know what to expect as far as that goes. Like my gut says no. I haven't heard anything either way, because I think they feel pretty good about the roster right now and the positions that they currently have filled and all that. But as you said, I mean, it's we've been hearing for 2 years now about offers for Cole Bassett and Sam Vines, and are they going to go? Are they going to stay? So I think at some point those guys are going to leave. I don't know if it's going to be this summer in particular, but I don't think it doesn't seem like there's anything that they're really missing at the moment that they actively need to bring in someone for anyway.
I have a buddy who's a season ticket holder. He loves going to the games. How do the Rapids become bigger in the Denver area, in your opinion? Like, how do they capture more people's attention? Because the on-field product right now it's compelling. Like, it really is.
I mean, as you guys said a couple of teams ago, winning helps. Winning helps everything. But right now, I mean, it's such a Broncos town, and the Avs and the Nuggets and all the other major sports teams here. But there are soccer fans in Denver. I mean, when these international teams come to Mile High, there is no problem finding soccer fans to fill that stadium. So I really do think it's just creating a winning culture year after year. And I think they're getting there. I think they still have some work to go and, some progress to make. But I think starting to become a winning team helps.
Do they have the cap room to sign Jokic as maybe a central midfielder? Let him run the show a little bit with that vision?
I mean, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one, but that would help. I mean, yes, that could be one strategy that would help.
Could we do, and now my imagination is running wild, an MLS Cup matchup, Union with Embiid, just throwing it out there, big man on big man, Jokic and the Rapids. This has been Abby Mood. Of course, you can follow her work over at Burgundy Wave. Abby, you do great work. We love following it. It's really the best way for me to keep up with what's going on with this team. We appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a meeting to be at, so we'll let you go here and keep it moving. With the Portland Timbers at number 9. Doyle, what have you seen from the Timbers so far? I still remain incredibly high, and it's not just because they sent me a free jersey with Jeremy Abobasi's name on the back, which I am currently rocking if you're listening via audio. I just think you mentioned it, 10 injuries. They have just been absolutely ravaged. They have the talent. They have the track record. The question is, will it all come together in time for this season to be what they want it to be.
Yeah, I'm not going to bet against that, to be honest with you. I think that, Sebastian Blanco has been very close to coming back for like 3 weeks now, and I assume that they just decided after getting those results for San Jose and Seattle, like, why rush it? I know Nijgota is a little bit further away, but between Abobasi and Mora, they have, plenty of coverage at center forward. Getting Diego Chara some rest, obviously he picked up a knock, but getting him some rest and getting 2 big results anyway, that's huge. And then on top of that, Merritt Paulson was tweeting that, like, yeah, there's reinforcements coming. We're going to make a couple of signings this summer. So, I mean, this game was not great. Giving up 3 set-piece goals, no matter who's out, that tells me that there is some sort of problem that they have to deal with. But I am more impressed by what I've seen from the Timbers over the first 2 months than anything, just because they've done all of this, juggling so many injuries and juggling CCL play. And they seem like they're in good shape to get some of those guys back, plug them right into the lineup, and be one of the best teams in the Western Conference. So I think it's mostly fine. I'm
not too worried about them. They're still above the playoff line. Yes, this was a tough loss. Yes, Philadelphia Union, one of the best teams in the league. No, Giovanni Savarese should not be worried unless there are more health issues with some of those stars and also the role players that keep them afloat going forward. Got to get those fixed, and if they do, I think they'll be fine. Let's finish off the top 10. A reminder here that you can watch or rewatch if you've joined recently or whatever it may be and you missed what we were talking about with the top 10 of the Power Rankings in Week 7, that the top 10 goes on YouTube in its entirety. So you can check that out later today if you've missed it. You got to stick around live for the rest of the show. Nashville is number 10. We've got Drake Hills here with the Tennessean. Drake, we're going to spare everybody any and all food/candy takes, man. So let's just talk about this Nashville team, okay?
Yeah, I'm not a big guac and avocado fan myself, so we can just move forward from that.
Blessings be unto you, Drake Hills. Blessings be unto you. 7th in the East right now are Nashville, 1.57 points per game. Where do they stand in your mind? What's the team talking about?
Well, the team is inconsistent in their narrative of coming back from 2-0. They've done it, feels like every single game. But obviously, Gary's going to remain optimistic in the fact that he's going to reward and praise his group for the work rate that they show, especially into the second half. Although in that 2-0 deficit that they've continued since the season started. They've all been attributed to slow starts. And so I think, for me, it was quite surprising against Atlanta where it was not only a slow start to begin the first half, it was a slow start to begin the second half. And that was a little bit surprising to me because if you go back to the Cincy game, you go back to the Montreal game, although those games, whether it was Montreal scoring later on, getting their second goal, or when they just completely dominated the entire second half against Cincinnati, they responded a little bit better in that second half, and that wasn't the case against Atlanta. So, with Gary, the whole team talk has just been about, praising the guys who are able to come up clutch, like obviously Hani, getting in 2 goals in 3 minutes, and I think for someone like Hani, I've said this on our podcast, on our Plugged In podcast. I personally prefer Hani as more of an attacker than a distributor. As a number 10, I mean, he's always seemed to be a little more dangerous when he's actually looking for goals rather than setting up, whether it's Baji, Cadiz, Sapong, whoever's up front playing up front of him. He seems to be a little bit more clinical, and he has more poise and knows what to do when there's not a lot of space rather than having ample space to make plays. So I certainly hope that this probably isn't going to be the narrative for much longer because, I mean, yes, it's MLS, but there's also going to be a team that's not going to let you come back from 2-0 down. That's going to probably put the hammer down in the first half.
So one of the things that we've seen, and part of it is because Hani still doesn't really have a natural position, is Gary Smith is kind of, I don't want to say scrapped, but he's leaned more towards a 4-4-2, going with 2 forwards up top than the 4-2-3-1 that I think was the default for most of last year. And it's kind of the opposite of what we saw from the Revs that we were talking about back almost at the top of the show. Do you think this is just from the first couple of weeks, like we weren't generating enough in the box, so we just have to have multiple targets in the box? It's obviously a very cross-heavy offense. Or do you think this is a permanent shift that we're seeing from this team in terms of how they approach the game?
Now, I don't think Gary's ever going to admit that he needs the 4-4-2. I mean, he's going to stick to, that's his shape, right? The 4-2-3-1, that's his thing. Like, that's what he's done and previous stops, and that's what he's going to continue to do with this side. And, aside from Hani, the squad really is built upon that, having that sort of base. And it's tough to include Hani in there because, as you mentioned, with New England, against New England, Carlos Hill wasn't even in the middle. He was playing out wide, which, that's, you see what happens when you have your best creator in an unnatural position, in a non-creative, so to speak, position where he can't really dictate what's going on offensively. So not having Hani in there means the 4-4-2, but what that does, I think, is actually give a little bit more opportunity for Sapong and for Cadiz to actually put in some work and actually look decent in the attacking third. But it's never going to be something consistent that we're going to see. I mean, just look at the shapes that teams have played against Nashville. When they do play the 4-4-2, they're not necessarily worried about the central midfield. They trust that Anibal and Dax can handle things. But obviously what you saw with Atlanta, you had that midfield was pretty much, they were completely pounding Nashville, and then you could attribute that to how wide they were playing as well. But it was really tough for Dax and Anibal to get on the ball a lot, and they still played the 4-2-3-1. So sometimes it's not going to look as easy and not going to look as clean as you might expect with the 4-2-3-1. But when you have a midfield that's got 2 or 3 bodies in there controlling possession, I don't think a 4-4-2 would actually work in that situation. So I think it's going to keep bouncing back and forth. I think that'll be my clean answer.
All right, let's get maybe an unclean answer here because nobody knows what's going to happen this summer, particularly with Cadiz, but overall for Nashville. How do you see sort of the activity from Mike Jacobs? What are the smoke signals coming out? I know the first primary window just closed, but we have a summer window coming up, and there's a big decision to be made about Cadiz. Where do you think this is trending?
I don't know. If you know Mike Jacobs the way I know Mike Jacobs, there's not going to be any smoke. There's just going to be a decision at the last minute. He's one to keep his cards closed. I mean, he's not going to give you any hints. I mean, that's just who he is. But if I'm talking specifically off the eye test, I don't see it going. It's not a definite yes. Like if you look at what Jonder has done recently, obviously he had that great start at the beginning of the season. He gets a trio of goals, and goals that are coming in clutch as well to spark a team coming back from 2-0. His motor seems to continuously drop off towards the end of matches.
He hasn't looked like a DP.
Yeah, but he has. And the thing that I've, again, going back to what I've said on different platforms is he's your best distributor from an attacking position. And what I mean by that is, when he's holding up the ball or when he's out wide and when a ball's played through the channel to him and he has a defender one-on-one, they're not really willing to face up and guard him like close, mark him closely. They're giving him a lot of space. And what he does is he has the actual skill to play in balls to, whether it's Randall against Austin or against Hani or sending something into Sapong when they're playing a 2-striker system at some point. And so he gives a little bit more of a diverse skill set that I don't think Baji, I don't think Sapong, and I don't think even Abu Danladi, when he's healthy, can give you. So that on the other side, his motor isn't as consistent and going the full 90 as maybe I would like to see. But what he does is he gives you a little bit more diversity in his skill set. And if you choose not to bring him in permanently, I don't think when you were talking about the 4-4-2 and the 4-2-3-1, I think you lose a lot of that flexibility. So, but Mike Jacobs is probably going to surprise us this month or going into next month, and so we'll have to wait and see. But the reality is that you're not the same without Jonder Cadiz.
Yeah, they'd have to have a solution. There's no doubt about that. Nashville at 10, they stayed even. They're 7th in the Eastern Conference. This has been Drake Hills. Live Life Drake, of course, doing his thing over at the USA Today Network and the Tennessean. Appreciate you, man. Thank you. Love that you finally agree with me on a food-related topic vis-a-vis guacamole and avocado. This has been the top 10 of the power rankings for Week 7 MLS. You can see them right here if you're watching on YouTube. 1, Seattle. 2, New England. 3, Philly. 4, New York City FC. 5, Kansas City. 6, Galaxy. 7, Orlando. 8 is Colorado Rapids. 9, the Timbers. And 10, Nashville SC. Again, if you're listening right now on Twitter Spaces, you can watch the full top 10 over on YouTube. You can't catch the full 27 there, though. You got to be on Twitter Spaces. We do this usually on Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Eastern. You can go to my Twitter handle, Andrew_Weeby, for all the news related to the show. We always have fun doing it. All right, Doyle, let's get into